barracks fell silent. Sergeant Miller stood at the front, his eyes scanning the line of recruits, every pair of boots lined up perfectly in their dull standard issue boots. "Private Brooks," he barked, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Step forward." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. The air felt thick. My legs trembled, but I forced myself to stand tall. "You think you're ready for this?" Miller's eyes drilled into me like I was a piece of dirt he was about to scrape off his boot. "Look at you, soft, weak. You don't belong here." He said it loud enough for everyone in the barracks to hear. I could feel the eyes on me, the stares, the whispers starting to spread through the room. I thought that was the end of it. But no, it was just the beginning. I had barely completed the first round of drills before Miller singled me out. He walked over, grabbed my arm, and shoved me to the front of the platoon, making sure everyone got a clear look at me. "This one's gonna be trouble," he muttered to the others, though it wasn't meant for me. The rest of the recruits stood at attention, but I could see their eyes flicking over to me. Some faces smirked, others just shook their heads in silent judgment. I could hear their thoughts loud and clear. "What's he doing here? He's never going to make it." "Pick up the pace, Brooks," Miller shouted again, his voice ringing with derision. "You're dragging us down. You look like you've never seen a push-up in your life. Are you even trying?" I wanted to say something, defend myself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I pushed harder, my breath coming faster, my legs burning as the rest of the platoon moved effortlessly ahead of me. I thought I could hear snickers behind me, whispers about how I didn't belong, how the only reason I was here was because I'd somehow slipped through the cracks of a system that wasn't made for people like me. I kept my head down. If I could just make it through the day, maybe tomorrow wouldn't be as bad. But then Sergeant Miller barked again, his words cutting deep. "Private Brooks, you're a disgrace. You're embarrassing us all. Get to the back." He turned his back, and as I walked, I felt every step heavier than the last. I wasn't just walking to the back of the line. I was walking to the back of every expectation, every dream I had of succeeding here. The worst part wasn't even the words Miller said. It was the silence that followed, the way everyone just looked away. No one stepped in. No one said anything. And then there was Ellie Ramirez. She was always on the edge of things, quiet, with her eyes constantly observing. I caught her gaze for just a second as I walked past her. There was something in her eyes. Sympathy? Maybe. But I didn't need it. I just needed to get through this. I couldn't help but wonder if she felt pity for me, or if she was just one more person who knew exactly how out of place I felt. My uniform was still too loose around the waist. My boots weren't shined well enough. And the worst part? I didn't feel like I belonged here either. The doubt settled like a weight on my chest. The only thing I had was my will to keep going, but even that felt thin. That night in the mess hall, I sat by myself. No one came near me, and I didn't expect them to. I tried to focus on the food in front of me, the bland meatloaf that tasted like cardboard. I barely noticed when Ellie sat down across from me, not making a sound, just picking at her own meal. For a moment, it felt like the entire world had shut off, like I was the only one left in the room. The other recruits were all talking, laughing, but it didn't reach me. I thought about what Miller said. "You don't belong here." I tried to push the words away. I really did. But they stuck, digging into me with every step, every drill, every shout. Ellie didn't say anything at first, just sat quietly. But when she finally spoke, her voice was almost too quiet to hear. "You're doing fine," she said, almost to herself. "Just keep your head down. Don't let them break you." I looked up at her, confused. "You think I'm doing fine?" I asked, a bitter laugh escaping before I could stop it. "They don't think I'm doing fine. I'm a joke to them." She didn't answer right away, and when she did, it wasn't what I expected. "You're not the only one who feels like you don't belong here, Brooks." She stood up before I could say anything else, walking away with the same quiet strength she always carried. I watched her go. She didn't say much, but that was enough. Maybe I wasn't completely alone in this. That night, as I lay in my bunk, I thought about her words. "You're not the only one." It wasn't much, but it was the first glimmer of something else, something more, and I held on to it, because that's all I had left. If I wanted to make it through this, I'd have to find a way to keep going, to prove that Sergeant Miller was wrong, that I did belong here, no matter what he or anyone else thought. But what I didn't know yet, what none of us knew, was how much this journey would change me. Not just as a soldier, but as a person. And it all started with that one small moment, Ellie's quiet words. I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't, not even close. The real fight was just beginning, and I had no idea how far it would take me. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The next few days blurred together in a fog of exhaustion and humiliation. Every morning started the same, an alarm shrieking too early, drills in the rain, miles of running, push-ups until my arms felt like jelly. Sergeant Miller's voice never let up. He always found a way to single me out. It was always the same. "Private Brooks, you're dragging us down." Or, "Is this all you got, Private?" I expected better from someone who calls themselves a soldier. The words stung, but the worst part was the silence that followed. The rest of the platoon never spoke up. They didn't need to. Their eyes said everything. They'd heard it before. They didn't expect anything different from me. The more I tried, the more I felt like I was sinking. I was constantly last in line, always behind everyone else. Even the smallest tasks seemed impossible, like making my bed just right or polishing my boots until they shone. Everyone else got it. This was second nature to them. But for me, every single movement was a struggle. At meals, I'd sit alone in the chow hall, my tray untouched as I watched the others talk and laugh. Their voices were a distant hum in my ears. I wasn't part of their world, not really. They never included me in their jokes or their plans. And Sergeant Miller? He wasn't letting up either. Every day he'd find a way to remind me that I didn't belong. "You're wasting my time, Private. If you can't keep up, you'll never make it here," he'd say after every failed attempt. It was like a mantra. I started to wonder if he was right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe I didn't have what it took. But it wasn't just Miller. The others, they weren't any better. The guys in my platoon didn't even try to hide their disappointment in me. Private Walker, a huge guy with a shaved head and an easy smile, would glance at me with a look that said it all. "You're not one of us," he'd think. I could feel it in his eyes. And then there was Ellie Ramirez. She was different. I noticed her before she ever said a word to me. She never laughed at my mistakes. She didn't mock me like the others did, but she never spoke up either. It was like she was waiting for something, watching quietly from the sidelines. One day during a particularly grueling physical training session, I collapsed. My body just couldn't take it anymore. The drills were non-stop, relentless. We were supposed to sprint, drop, do push-ups, then sprint again, over and over until our legs screamed for mercy. I could barely breathe. My chest felt tight. "Get up, Brooks," Miller shouted, his face red with anger. "You think this is gonna be easy? You're not cut out for this." I couldn't move. My body refused to listen. I saw Ellie out of the corner of my eye. She was in the back, doing her push-ups without a word. She didn't look at me like everyone else did, like I was a failure. There was something in her gaze, something quiet but strong. She wasn't judging me, not the way the others did. She just kept moving. I wanted to get up. I wanted to push through, but I felt like I couldn't. My legs were jelly. My arms were limp. But then something inside me shifted. A small spark of anger, of defiance. I forced myself to my hands and knees. Slowly, painfully, I dragged myself up. Miller's laughter followed me, but I didn't care anymore. I didn't look at him. I didn't look at anyone. I just focused on putting one foot in front of the other. That night, when the others were talking about the day's drills, I stayed silent. I could feel their eyes on me, their unspoken judgment hanging in the air. But Ellie didn't say anything either. She just sat across from me, like always, and for the first time she didn't look away. I looked at her, and she gave me the slightest nod, just enough to let me know she saw it. She saw the effort. She saw that I was still trying. The next day, it was more of the same. Drills, sweat, pain, Miller screaming at me. But something was different. I wasn't as afraid of him anymore. I knew he was going to tear me down no matter what I did, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I was tired of letting his words get under my skin, so I pushed harder. Even when my legs burned, even when my lungs felt like they were going to explode, I pushed. I wasn't going to be the weak link anymore. Not if I could help it, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. We were out on the range shooting practice for the first time in weeks. My hands shook. I couldn't focus. I kept missing the targets. Every time Miller's voice would cut through the air. "Private Brooks, you're wasting ammunition. Get it together." I knew I wasn't hitting the mark. I could feel the stares of my teammates on me. They were all doing fine. They had it easy, or so it seemed. I felt the weight of their disappointment on my shoulders. I wasn't just failing myself, I was failing them too. Ellie was up next, and I saw her stance. The way she lined up her shot, the calm focus in her eyes. She didn't rush. She didn't shake. When she fired, it was perfect. Then it was my turn again. I aimed, but my hands were unsteady. I couldn't focus. I was too caught up in what Miller would say next. But before I could fire, I heard a voice, quiet but steady, cutting through the tension. "Breathe, Brooks. Focus." It was Ellie. She was standing at the edge of the line, just watching, just waiting. For the first time, I focused. I didn't think about Miller. I didn't think about the others. I didn't even think about failure. I just breathed. And when I pulled the trigger, the target fell. It wasn't a perfect shot, but it was enough. I looked at Ellie, and for the first time, I saw something else in her eyes. It wasn't just sympathy anymore. It was respect. Miller didn't say anything, but the silence that followed felt different this time. It wasn't a silence filled with judgment. It was something else, maybe even a hint of approval. I wasn't there yet, not by a long shot, but that moment, when I finally hit the mark, when I finally proved to myself that I could do it, something shifted. Not just in me, but in the air around me. I could feel it. The others were watching. They weren't laughing anymore. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible anymore. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. It was the kind of morning that made you question why you ever signed up for this. The sun barely crept over the horizon, and yet the sound of boots marching in perfect rhythm echoed through the camp. Sergeant Miller was already barking orders, his voice cutting through the cold air like a knife. "Up and at 'em, Private Brooks! You think you're here for a vacation? Move it!" I dragged myself out of my bunk, my body stiff from the endless drills, my muscles sore from pushing harder than I thought was possible. Every inch of me ached, but I kept moving. I didn't want to give Miller the satisfaction of seeing me break. That morning was supposed to be another round of field exercises. Simple stuff. At least that's what it seemed like. A routine training session where we'd navigate through the woods, retrieve a piece of gear, and make it back to camp. A standard test of physical stamina and mental fortitude. But this time, it felt different. The weight of the task seemed heavier. The stakes felt higher. Miller was already on edge that morning. He had that look in his eyes, the one that meant he was going to push us past the point of exhaustion, just to see who would quit first. I had been in that spot before, the one where you feel like giving up is the easiest thing, but you keep going anyway. We were halfway through the forest, the trees thick and oppressive, the smell of damp earth in the air. The trail was steep, and the ground was uneven. But we kept moving. The silence between us recruits felt heavy, but it wasn't just the silence. It was the weight of expectation. I was barely keeping up, my legs burning with each step, my breath short, but I wasn't going to stop. I couldn't. "Come on, Brooks, catch up!" Miller's voice rang out from the front, mocking and harsh. "You're holding us all back. Don't make me come back there." I gritted my teeth, forcing my legs to push faster, though it felt like they were made of lead. I couldn't fail now. Not after everything. I was going to show them, show Miller, show the whole damn platoon, that I belonged here. But just as I thought I was pushing through, I heard a loud crack from my right. Private Torres. She had tripped on a root, and now she was lying face down in the mud. Her equipment was scattered, and I could hear her gasping for breath. "Private Torres, get up!" Miller yelled, but there was no sympathy in his voice, just irritation. Torres groaned in pain, trying to push herself up, but the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't going to make it. She was done. "Help her!" I shouted before I even realized what I was saying. The words just came out of me, my body moving before my mind could process them. I wasn't thinking about the consequences. I wasn't thinking about Miller's wrath. I was thinking about my squad mate who needed help. But Miller didn't care. He stormed over to us, grabbing me by the collar and pulling me back. "You think you can play hero now, Private? Get back in line. Before I make you wish you hadn't even tried." His face was inches from mine, spitting with rage. But I couldn't just leave her there. Something inside me snapped. I shoved Miller's hand off my chest and knelt beside Torres. "We're not leaving her behind," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. The other recruits stood frozen, waiting for something, anything to happen. But Miller just stood there staring at me. He was taken aback by my defiance, and for a moment it felt like the world had paused. "Fine," Miller finally spat. "You want to play the hero? Do it on your own time, Private." He stepped back, and for a split second I thought he might do something worse. Punish me, send me back to the barracks, strip me of my rank. But he didn't. He just stood there watching as I helped Torres to her feet. I didn't know what came over me. It wasn't courage. It wasn't strength. It was just the simple knowledge that I wasn't going to let anyone in my squad suffer because of my hesitation. As we carried Torres back to camp, the rest of the platoon fell into step behind us, unsure at first, but eventually following our lead. Even Ellie, quiet, observant Ellie, was right there beside me helping with Torres' gear without saying a word. The walk back to camp was long, longer than it should have been. The sweat on my brow wasn't just from exhaustion. It was from the tension, the dread of what was waiting for me back at camp. I knew there would be consequences. There had to be. Miller wasn't going to let me get away with this. When we returned, Miller didn't say anything immediately. He just stared at me, a fire burning in his eyes. The others had already set their gear down and moved on, but Miller lingered, waiting. I could feel the tension in the air, the pressure building. "You think you did the right thing, Private?" Miller's voice was low, menacing. I didn't back down. "I do." For a moment it felt like everything in the world was hanging on that one moment, that one confrontation. Then something shifted. Miller's eyes flickered for just an instant, like he was about to say something, but instead he turned and walked away. And just like that, it was over. But not really. It wasn't until much later that I realized what had just happened. Miller's authority had cracked. It wasn't a loud, dramatic shift, but it was there. Something had changed. The way the rest of the platoon looked at me was different. Not in an obvious way, but I could feel it. The shift in the air when they passed me in the hall. The way their eyes didn't avoid mine anymore. I had done something unexpected. I had stood up, not just to Miller, but to the expectations that everyone else had of me. I had proven that I wasn't going to be the weak link, and that made all the difference. But there was more to this than just that moment. There were still things I had to prove, still more miles to run, still more push-ups to do. But in that moment, I understood something. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up no matter what, even when the odds were stacked against you, even when you felt like you were going to break. And when I looked at Ellie later that night, sitting at the edge of her bunk in the barracks, she gave me a small, knowing nod. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider. I didn't feel invisible. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was starting to belong. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The days after the field exercises passed by in a haze of tension and suspicion. Sergeant Miller seemed to find new ways to test me, as if he was waiting for me to crack. I could feel his eyes on me during every drill, his gaze heavy, like he was watching for any sign of weakness. Every mistake felt magnified. Every misstep felt like a ticking clock, waiting to blow up in my face. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first arrived. Every time Miller pushed me, every time the other recruits laughed or whispered, I swallowed the pain and kept moving. I wasn't going to give up. Not now, not ever. I had learned that much. The real test came that afternoon. We were preparing for a final challenge, A full day of obstacle courses, timed runs, and team-building exercises that would push everyone to their limits. Sergeant Miller had promised that it would be our hardest day yet. I didn't know if I was ready, but I knew I had to try. We lined up at the starting point, the sun high above us, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. The course stretched out in front of us, a maze of climbing walls, mud pits, and rope swings. The rest of the platoon stood tall, their eyes focused, their faces hard with determination. But me? I felt the familiar weight of doubt creeping in. "You better not fall behind today, Private Brooks," Miller's voice cut through the air like a whip. "I've had enough of watching you drag us down. If you can't keep up today, you can go home." His words stung, but I didn't let them show. I forced myself to take a deep breath, to clear my mind of everything except the course ahead. There was no room for doubt. Not now. The whistle blew and we were off. I pushed through the first obstacle with everything I had. I climbed the wall, my hands bleeding from the rough texture of the ropes. I sloshed through the mud, my boots sinking deeper with every step. The weight of the pack on my back felt like it was crushing me, but I kept moving. I could hear Miller's voice in the distance, shouting at someone else, but I refused to look back. Then I hit the rope swing. It was the hardest part of the course. You had to swing across a wide gap, just inches above a pool of thick, sticky mud. I had seen others do it without breaking a sweat, but when I swung, my hands slipped. My body crashed into the rope, and for a split second, I thought I was going to fall. Panic rose in my chest, but I didn't let it take hold. I grabbed the rope again, this time with a death grip, and swung across, my heart pounding in my chest. The moment I landed on the other side, I wanted to collapse. My body was screaming for rest, but there was no time. The next obstacle was waiting. The rest of the course blurred by in a series of grueling tests. Every challenge seemed harder than the last. I stumbled, I tripped, but I kept going. Every time I fell, I picked myself up. And then I saw it, the final obstacle. It was the wall, the highest, toughest one we had to climb. Everyone was already lined up to scale it, but I was last again. My hands were raw, my body bruised, but I wasn't going to stop. This was it. This was where I could prove myself. Miller was watching. I could feel his eyes on me. The whispers of the platoon were all I could hear as I approached the wall. They didn't believe in me. They never had. I took a deep breath and grabbed the rope. I was exhausted. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to stop. But I didn't stop. I pulled myself up, higher and higher, my arms trembling, my fingers slipping. "Move it, Brooks. You're not getting any sympathy." Miller's voice was sharp, cruel, as if trying to push me over the edge. But I didn't listen. I climbed. Inch by inch, I made my way up, my hands bleeding, my vision starting to blur. The top of the wall seemed so far away, but I wasn't going to give up now. I couldn't. When I reached the top, I felt a sense of triumph. I had done it. I had finally done it. But then something strange happened. Miller, who had been standing with his arms crossed, watching with a smug look on his face, suddenly stepped forward. His eyes were cold, his expression unreadable. "You think that's enough, Private?" he said, his voice low, dangerous. "You think you've earned respect just because you climbed a wall? This isn't over. Not by a long shot." I looked at him, my heart racing. For the first time, I wasn't scared of him. Not anymore. "I don't need your respect, Sergeant," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here to prove something to myself." The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of everything that had led up to this moment. The tension between us felt like it could snap at any second. Miller's eyes narrowed, but he didn't say anything else. He turned away, walking back to the front of the group. The rest of the platoon remained silent, but I could feel the shift. They had seen me. They had watched me struggle, watched me fight, and for the first time, they didn't look at me like I was the weak link. They looked at me like I was one of them. Later, in the barracks, things were different. The whispers had stopped. The mocking smiles had disappeared. The recruits didn't avoid my eyes anymore. Ellie, who had always been quiet, pulled me aside after the lights were turned off. "You did good today," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "You've earned it." For the first time since I arrived, I felt like I belonged. Miller didn't say anything the next day. His treatment of me had changed, but it wasn't just because of the wall. It was because I had stopped trying to prove myself to him. I had stopped letting him control my worth. I had started proving it to myself. The power had shifted, not through words or a confrontation, but through action, through resilience. I wasn't just some recruit anymore. I was part of the team. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The day after the final obstacle course was like any other, except it wasn't. There was a strange weight in the air, an unspoken tension that everyone felt but didn't say. For the first time, the entire platoon was on edge. It wasn't because of the drills or the endless push-ups. It was because we all knew something had changed. Something had shifted. I could feel it in the way the others looked at me now. It wasn't the same judgment or mocking I had faced before. It wasn't pity either. It was respect. I could see it in their eyes, the subtle shift from doubt to acknowledgement. But there was still one thing left undone, the thing that had been hanging over me from the start. Miller. He hadn't said a word to me since the obstacle course, but I could tell he was watching and waiting for me to slip up, to make one mistake so he could remind me of my place. I wasn't sure if he was holding a grudge or if he was just trying to push me even harder. But I knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let me off easy. The morning was quiet as we lined up for inspection, everyone standing tall, boots polished, uniforms crisp. Miller walked down the line, his eyes scanning each of us, his steps sharp and deliberate. He stopped in front of me, just like he always did. But this time there was something different in his gaze, something I couldn't quite place. He looked me up and down, his mouth set in a hard line. Then without a word, he gave a slight nod and moved on to the next recruit. The tension in the air didn't lift. Not entirely. It was like we were all holding our breath, waiting for something to happen. I wanted to feel relief, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. That afternoon we had a briefing. The command staff gathered us in the common room, their faces serious. They talked about upcoming assignments, about what was expected of us, about the importance of teamwork. But I wasn't really listening. My mind kept drifting back to Miller. I knew I had to prove myself to him again, but I wasn't sure how. Then, just as I thought the day would end like every other, something unexpected happened. Ellie. She was standing off to the side, listening to the briefing, her expression unreadable. She was always quiet, always keeping her thoughts to herself. But today she stepped forward, and in that moment, everything changed. "Sergeant Miller," she said, her voice steady but firm. The room fell silent. Miller looked up, his eyebrows furrowing in surprise. "Private Ramirez, what do you want?" "I think it's time to stop treating Private Brooks like he's some kind of burden," she said, her words ringing out sharp and clear. "He's proven himself. He's more than capable, and it's time you recognize that." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Everyone in the room was looking at Ellie like she had just set off a bomb. Miller's face was unreadable, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "You think you can stand up to me, Private?" Miller's voice was low, dangerous. "You think you know what's best?" Ellie didn't flinch. "I'm just telling the truth. Brooks has earned his place here. You need to stop holding him back." It was like the air in the room had shifted. People were shifting in their seats, glancing at each other, unsure of what to do. But Ellie didn't back down. She stood her ground, unwavering. Miller's face hardened, but instead of shouting, instead of throwing Ellie out of the room, he turned and walked to the front. He stood there for a moment, as if weighing something. And then, to my surprise, he spoke. "You're right, Private Ramirez," he said, his voice cold. "Private Brooks has earned his place. But the rest of you, if you think you're going to coast through this, you're wrong. I expect more from all of you. Every single one of you." He paused, then turned back to me, his eyes cold but calculating. "You're not done yet, Private Brooks, but today you've earned my respect, for now." And just like that, the tension that had been hanging over us broke. The silence lifted. People started nodding to each other as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. Ellie gave me a quick look, her expression softening for the first time in weeks. She hadn't just stood up for me. She had stood up for what was right. She had seen me, really seen me, for the first time. Later, as we walked back to the barracks, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of pride. I had fought for my place here. I had earned it, not just through drills and sweat, but through my actions. And for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged. As I passed Miller, he didn't say anything, but his nod was enough. It wasn't a declaration of friendship or admiration, but it was respect, and that was all I needed. Ellie walked beside me, quiet as usual, but this time there was a different energy between us. She had seen something in me that I hadn't seen myself, and maybe that was all I needed. A little bit of belief from someone else to push me forward. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't just some recruit anymore. I was part of something bigger. I had earned my place, and that made all the difference. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The American flag waved gently in the wind, its colors bright against the clear sky. I stood there alone at the edge of the base, my eyes fixed on the flag, the same flag I had fought for, the one that now felt like a symbol of everything I had earned. I wasn't the same man who had walked through the gates weeks ago. No longer the underdog, no longer invisible. I had found my place, not through the words others spoke, but through my actions, my resilience, and my willingness to stand tall in the face of adversity. As I stood there, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Sergeant Miller. He didn't say a word, but he gave me a nod. Respect, the kind that could never be forced, but had to be earned. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the journey we all shared, the sweat, the struggle, the silent moments where we made a choice to push through, to keep going. In this world, actions speak louder than words, and we had all proven what we were made of. What I learned along the way wasn't just about surviving the drills or earning respect from the others. It was about recognizing the dignity in every person, regardless of where they start, and understanding that true strength comes from the inside. The world may try to break you, but it can only make you stronger if you stand firm. You reap what you sow, and the seeds of perseverance, respect, and brotherhood will always bloom in the end. If this story resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video to show your support, and if you want to see more stories that inspire, hit that subscribe button. As always, keep your head high and know that you're not alone in this journey. Take care, and let's keep pushing forward together.